And welcome back to Black Chucks and Convos with me, Crystal, the Inclusion Lady. And I want to thank you for liking, visiting, subscribing, and sharing my YouTube channel. As you know by now, I am a DEI and inclusion marketing strategist where I help companies foster environments where employees feel like they belong and can thrive. If you don't know, DEI is focused on balancing and expanding unique cultural perspectives in a society where we're historically conditioned to see through a narrow lens. I also share an extensive background in the beauty world, inside and out, self-leadership, life coaching, and I have a passion for empowering people to follow their dreams. Black Checks and Convos is a space where we can have honest, educational, and deep conversations where we share stories in the realms of DEI, as I mentioned, which includes racism, sexism, ageism, ableism, and things of the like, self-leadership, goal achievement, entrepreneurship, and also, again, beauty from the inside out. My guests are here to share their stories, points of views, and tips to empower you and also let you know where they can be followed. Today, I have a beautiful guest. Her name is Cheryl Clark, Dr. To Be, a dynamic force in the realm of personal growth and empowerment. As a seasoned psychotherapist, master communication coach, and vision leader, Cheryl has dedicated her career to helping individuals reclaim their power, connect authentically, and lead lives filled with purpose. She is wife to Gregory Clark Sr. for 29 years, a parent to six remarkable with, I'm sorry, I might start over. Is that since remarkable kids? Cheryl, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to start over.
Okay.
But I don't have that here. It just says parent to six remarkable, and then it goes with over 13 years. You have
Oh,
six children?
I do.
Okay, I'm gonna start over, and I apologize.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, six children.
I have six children.
That's so beautiful. Okay, all right, go back to the bio. Okay, everyone, meet Cheryl Clark, a dynamic force in the realm of personal growth and empowerment. As a seasoned psychotherapist, master communication coach, and vision leader, Cheryl has dedicated her career to helping individuals reclaim their power, connect authentically, and lead lives filled with purpose. She is wife to Gregory Clark Sr. for 29 years, a parent to six remarkable children with over 13 years of experience in various mental health settings. Cheryl has honed her expertise in addressing a wide range of challenges, from anxiety and depression to trauma and interpersonal conflicts. Cheryl's journey as a communication coach began as she recognized the profound impact of effective communication on human connection and personal growth. Drawing from her background in psychology, spirituality, and leadership, Cheryl developed the PIES Unstuck Communication Method, a transformative approach that empowers individuals to break free from limiting communication patterns and cultivate powerful relationships. As the founder of Speak Your Power Now, Cheryl is on a mission to ignite the inner spark within each individual, empowering them to step into their greatness and live authentically. Through her coaching programs, workshops, podcasts, and speaking engagements, Cheryl inspires others to embrace their unique strengths, overcome obstacles, and unleash their full potential. She is very dear to me. I am so excited about this interview here, and this conversation, rather. Please, everyone, welcome Miss Cheryl Clark in the building, Dr. To Be, okay?
Well, all right.
uh,
Hearing my own bios talk is amazing.
oh
Thank
my gosh, like you've accomplished so much. And I enjoyed reading your bio. Like, I cannot wait to dig into like, how did you get to this point? My goodness. So that's probably going to be my first question. I would like to know, you can state where you're born, because I know where you're from. People love to say where they're from.
you for
And
where I'm from.
uh, yeah, just tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, yeah, well, thank you so much, Crystal, for this opportunity to be with your community. Like I always say, I am a girl from the Bronx, and I learned a couple of tools along the way, and I'm here to share them with you. So that's how I open up all the time because I want to normalize the fact that I may be a mass communication coach, I may be a therapist, I may be a mom, I may be all these things in regards to the accolades, but I found out with all the experience that came along with it in my essence of my culture where I'm from that made me who I am today. And I'm very so much connected with those roots and how it made me to a space where those challenges where I did grow up in those that family where just to give you context,
Mhm.
um, I am from the Bronx, New York, and my raised by a single parent. Yeah, BS, but you know, whoever said from there, yeah, we always say BX on the Boogie Down Bronx. And in regards to who I am and where I am today, my journey and my upbringing has really transformed of, I believe, of where I am today coming from a single parent household, my mom, I never saw my biological father, and facing, of course, financial struggles and multiple challenges with education, the complexities of all that. It really had me to really look and see inside myself with the resiliency that I
Mm.
really had to tap into, and that self reliance on me, and even finding out later on in life what I was challenged with dyslexia and things of that nature. So those facing that really, I had to really understand the obstacles and striving through that and learning those tools along the way has really given me the resiliency and the determination and the empathy for others to move in that.
That's really rich. Okay, so did you have siblings at all?
Yeah, so I have one brother. We're 6 years apart. I'm the eldest. So
Okay,
he reveres me as kind of like the mom type of situation because my mom had to go to work.
right.
So there was a lot of times that it was a challenge and to bridge that. So that I stepped into that role of being his like mom, parental type of guidance. And a lot of us can probably latchkey kids and things of that nature. So I had to step into that role.
Yeah, okay. Got that. Um, so one thing I did notice about the kids when I lived in New York, it it appeared that the children that were already kind of self sufficient, um, as opposed to me being brought up in Virginia, where um, I don't know. I feel like there were kids jumping on a train to go to schools in New York, whereas here, I mean, not here, I'm not here. I mean, Virginia, you were standing at a bus stop. There are parents there just kind of like there watching the bus stop and you're getting on a bus and all of that good stuff. But it seemed like the children were more advanced when I moved to New York and just kind of watching like, wow, like they're actually getting on this train by themselves and jumping on a bus. I just never seen anything like it to me. So like I think being from New York is such a treat and a privilege. And it's a gold mine, in my opinion, because you're growing up with so much culture around you and you learn how to get around and navigate through a city on your own pretty early. Would you say that you had that experience or you don't even see it like that?
So we had to that's a part we're going to talk about today with that self-leadership type of ability to be able to do that. And a lot of times it was we had to do it. So it's not like it was a thing you had to learn the city. You
Yeah.
had to begin to learn that. But I was fortunate that my mother she put us through parochial school. And my life was yes, I took the bus and there's some things that I had to grow up early in and some things in poverty and some things of that nature.
Yeah.
But one thing we had was community. Uh,
Mhm.
inside the building. So, we can go up to Miss Nita's house. We can go to, there's areas where people looked out for your child. And
Yes.
so that's what we had. We had a sense of community and we had a sense of if somebody was doing something on the block, you know that your mother was going to find out about you doing whatever you did on that block because it was a sense of community in there. It maybe may have been from the Bronx, but when you went to our block, there was a sense of community there. So I would say that everyone, we may have been walking to the bus stop by ourselves, but we knew that was Maddie's daughter. We knew that that
Mm.
was Maddie's son. We knew we was working out for each other in that regard because we were a community, if
Ooh,
that makes any sense.
ooh, yes, because that word community is so to me, I just love it. And I feel like sometimes where we are now today is it's a missing link,
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
especially in the Black culture, in my opinion. So I do, I'll say, relate to the community aspects a little bit more further in my past, where I feel like it was like you needed, you had to have community, whereas to now, there's communities, I guess, socially, like social media wise, but like, I don't know. It would just seem like a little dispersed at this point. You mentioned that you were enduring dyslexia. I can't say that correctly. Dyslexia. Okay, there we go. Um, when did you know, like when did you find out that you had that? And then what was that experience before you found out?
Well, I'll say this. Did, so let me just push back just a little bit.
Okay.
I found out actually not so long ago in my early 40s. So
What?
yeah, so growing up, just so we understand what dyslexia is,
Okay.
it seems like people don't understand. It affects your our reading, our writing, and our spelling. So I just want you to recognize. But we have a superpower of understanding how to decode things and things of that nature, and how we understand how we can accommodate ourselves. So I learned very early on strategies of the challenges that I may had early on. So I was a class clown. I was always distracting from having to read out loud. We may understand it in our head, but when we read out loud, it was something different. So what happened was I was always looking to have that extra support. I always have to read things over 3 and 4 times. Now, when I found out, it just took me over the moon because the support that I needed, maybe, not just from my spouse or from someone else, that extra support where I had to do, I understood that that was my superpower to able to see things that other people couldn't see it in that certain kind of way. So I learned that I struggled with sounds and spelling of words and stuff of that nature. And so, of course, spell check became my friend and things of that nature. It never stopped me. It never stopped my drive to be able to do that. So I said, let me, as a clinician, I said, so I had this young person, and I see an adult that I work with, and she was like, I've had dyslexia for years, and she started saying some of the things that she was dealing with. Just as a clinician, we may do things, but that may not be our specialty, right?
Okay.
So when she was talking about it, and I said, I should take a test because I'm thinking that that can be something that I may have been struggling with. Lo and behold, there you go. Identify how you can been to do this. And yes, I, had dyslexia. And I'm like, so how do I now move her? And you know what? It was so fulfilling to find that out because it
Mm,
normalized that there's nothing wrong with me. And
yes.
it just had a sense of understanding that I could understand Cheryl more in
Mm,
regards to now how do I handle this superpower? We don't call it a disability, but superpower of dyslexia, in where you are moving through it and not it doesn't have you, but you have it.
wow. So it wasn't until the latter age that you found out.
Yeah.
However, obviously you were still able to go along and get along in your life, I wouldn't
It's
say
just like with anything. That's just like with anything. I had anxiety, you manage it, you do certain things. Everybody has a little something.
Okay.
But I think the most thing that we need to know is awareness.
Right.
Some of us are not aware and we normalize the things, and we just like our community, the Black community doesn't feel like we can have postpartum depression. Oh yes, you can have depression, you can have anxiety. It's okay. It's just being aware of how, when I have these things, or these things may have me, that I need to now do a checklist and see, how do I take care of myself?
Yeah.
How do I make sure that I'm okay with this being this?
Right.
Not vilify myself or judge myself or shame myself because this may be showing up in my life, or shame others,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. It's almost like I've been hearing so much about this,
Okay.
more so now, um, more common than we know. I'm wondering if this is something that every child, should be tested for early on, because I think that some children are going through their school journey
Mhm.
and not even knowing, it's if they had the awareness of it, it could have maybe made the navigation a little easier.
It's funny you say that, because after COVID-19 happened, our children really struggled with reading, and the impact of the pandemic really affected our children, and things started to come up from the surface.
Mm,
And also, your zip code and the urban community of where you live at really determines the amount of extracurricular activity you have, or a special pull out of the classroom, being able to identify, maybe it's larger classrooms, so then you slip through this cracks. So I went to parochial school. So parochial school didn't have the same amount of funding as public school did, where it could identify it possibly earlier in my journey,
yeah.
because I was pulled out for reading. However, nothing identified me to say I need to get tested
Mm,
along further on, that things may be happening when challenges may be happening, because I had such a strong verbal communication that I knew how much to just say to get along, to get by.
yeah.
So I was that kid that was able to slip through the cracks because I knew how to talk myself out of it. So I had always had this I guess gift of gab.
Yeah.
So I've always had that. So I always was able to get myself just to slip out of there, but not to know that I had a reading difficulty reading or
Yeah.
anything like that. But I remember my mother, and just a story. My
Hmm.
mother had no idea, no thought to her. Um, I remember those reading tests, those spelling tests that you had to study for, and you have the spelling test on Friday. That's it, every week we had a spelling test. I remember it so clear. It was the first or second grade. I never forget this. And the word was if. This is how traumatic it was. If.
Hmm.
The word was if. And I could not. I wouldn't remember how to spell if. And every time my mom would hit me on my hand, just, each time I got it wrong. And I would get it wrong. The more I would attempt to spell a two-letter word.
Yeah.
Wasn't about the two-letter word. It was the connection of it all. And
Right.
just being able to connect sounds phonetically in the words, now I'm very clear about if I need support with sounding out a word. I said, tell me what that word, in that regard, I have no shame in my game.
Yes.
And in that regard, that is awareness. And
Yeah.
going back to our children, I think us having the advocacy to be able to speak up for oneself and to be able to ask questions that I may be struggling, that is where it starts.
Mm,
That is where it starts. And it starts with the parents also maybe struggling as well, because genetically it could be at home and we don't recognize, and to eliminate the shame.
yes.
That is what We need to eliminate the shame of surrounding certain diagnoses.
Correct.
It doesn't have you, you have it.
Correct. That was perfectly stated, and thank you for clarifying some of this for me because I'm also learning as well. And I'm not going to stay on the subject too long, but I am intrigued still, and I'm just thinking about the children who are in the schools and that you know, what do you call it? The school to prison pipeline. I just feel for some of our kids who are not being tested properly, or if they're in a home where the parent may not understand about the awareness of things either. So there definitely needs to be some awareness to the parents. And that word advocacy is something that I definitely stand on like all day long. So it sounds like we need to be pouring into our children to be able to, speak up for themselves as well as adults, of course. Um, so yeah, thank you for that. And then there's the question that I have for you that is DEI related. Um, so in the DEI world, which it does evolve quite often in terms of language and terms, um, to say people with disabilities is not taboo um in that industry. It is encouraged by um certain organizations who advocate for people with disabilities. They're saying that it's nothing wrong to say, and it's okay to say that. um However, I am hearing you say, hey, we're not going to call this a disability, we're going to call this a superpower. What is your angle on the people with disabilities versus superpower?
Um, so it's funny because a lot of times, looking at labels, and this is where we go to, I always say labels are for boxes and cans.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, what the Disability Act did was it allowed for us to, for things to be seen so funding can go to it.
Hmm.
This is what we need to understand. And we need to be intentional with our words. Now, if someone has a diagnosis of some sort, I don't like labeling them as a disability,
Hmm.
because what it does is it shows for me, and it labels you that either you cannot do something because the DIS dismisses it, and it doesn't allow for the person to now be able to move with it. So there's a lot of debate, like you said, in the workplace and even outside,
Yeah.
to disable someone to really have a voice. And we can harm someone's self-esteem, their perception of oneself, and the ability for them to be able to even see themselves and be aware that I can do this in conjunction with what's going on with me.
Hmm.
So I think normalizing what the person, this is why I always talk about effective communication, what the person would like for you to be known as. So I always say give the individual a voice and the space of the culture. This is why it's important for organizations to have a culture of DEI, because it's important for you to understand when you have diversity, when you have equity, you have inclusion, you understand and what that looks like for your company, because it's important for us to aim for inclusivity, but do we understand what really inclusivity really is? Do we understand what the equity is? Do we understand what diversity is? And I think because it's getting so widely used, it's important for people like yourself to educate people in understanding why labels are not the way to go. And it brings up barriers for us to now get past the barriers and be able to participate with each other and having a sense of belonging as Maslow hierarchy of needs are. Let's talk about the belonging is the thing that we all want to be a part in society. So when I believe when you do that, you separate it and the space for belonging doesn't be able to cultivate. If yeah.
Touche, touche. Um, and I'm going to let's continue this conversation because I see your points, and I also have a different reframe around some of the things that you see. So, and when I talk about, the people with disabilities label, um, it's not necessarily the company. These are like organizations that advocate for people with disabilities.
Yes.
So for instance, like there's an organization that advocates for people who are plus sized, and it's called NAFA. I forgot what it stands for, unfortunately, but they recommend that you say fat and call them fat and normalize it as fat. Like they are saying it's okay. Let's stop demonizing the word. Um, where for me, I see it as a pejorative. So I'm just like, I'm not going to say that. But the community itself is saying, no, say that, because what you're doing is you're making the word seem wrong
Mm.
around the context of it. And what we're trying to do is change that. Same thing as queer, same thing, the N word is a whole different subject, but it's like they're still, that's the sentiment that I'm getting with the people with disabilities are saying, like, look, it's okay. However, I also see what you're saying too, because like the word dis is away from, right? And it's pointing out a difference, but we're all different in some type of way, right? And from my understanding and research, there's like 67% of people on this planet that has a disability. So it's not even uncommon. It's a common thing because not all disabilities are seen, right? So I see that. Okay. But then when it comes to the labels, right? I think the ultimate goal perhaps is to get away from the labels, right? And we're all just a human being, we're a human species. And then I hear that you say that, this is also creating barriers for people, and it's separating. And I also see it as a boundary, right? It's a way to distinguish certain things from different people, because that's where the equity comes in, because we're not all given the same playing field and the resources to play on this field. So we need to be able to separate certain things. So what is your feedback to that?
So this is good. Um, as a communication coach, I believe language is power.
Yes.
And over time, the word disability has shifted over time.
Mhm.
There's a disability community that has even cultivated even the language surrounding why we use certain words in certain places. And that's for funding and that's for things that nature. Now, I believe what they're attempting to do with this organization for fat is maybe normalize the word fat,
Yes.
which is fine. What I am saying is your language in regards to societal surrounding the meaning of what disability is and the language we give it power. So when we see someone that maybe can't walk and or has a disability with their legs and we call them crippled, that is a no-no. Or we call someone crazy, we call someone when they have a mental health challenge. What happens, or when you have a diagnosis, what happens and what becomes the power of that is the shame and the stigma that it brings with the language you give it. So what I'm saying for people with disabilities, the respect and the acceptance that people would like to have in the world is that I'm first humans. And this is what the DEI community is all about. This is what we are talking about here when we strike this whole balance of the diversity, the equity, and the inclusion, is that now how can we include the humans that may have a challenge and be respectful? And
Right.
I find being respectful is for us to understand how that person would like to be addressed. Now you brought in queer and the LGBT community, I plus community. What happens is I always say with everything, get an understanding of the individual that's standing in before you.
Yep.
As a psychotherapist, the first thing I would ad nauseum, what they had us to do was disappear judgment. And judgment was, I could not believe all of the amount of training we had to disappear our own judgment, our biases. When we walk into a room, we don't know the implicit biases that we have that when we enter a room.
Hmm.
We enter a room, we don't leave that I'm an African American woman that was raised in the hood with a single mother, and I was struggling with certain things. I don't leave that outside. I don't leave the outside that I'm a mom of six and I'm married. I don't leave any of that out. Even my spirituality, I don't leave it outside.
Yeah.
However, I'm aware of it, and my words, what I say to my community, and the respect that I give to the person that's in front of me, whether it's mental health, whether you are dealing with someone that's deaf or hearing impaired, because those are two different things, blind, vision impaired, all of those things really have a really a really responsibility for
Hmm.
you as an individual when you're handling other human beings. And that's what I think we forget. As with DEI, we forget that we are human beings.
Hmm.
That's my short and long answer of that.
And it makes sense. And I agree, because that is the one thing that I would say is the point of DEI is all about respect.
Yes.
And it also is about acknowledgement, right? And with people, because so for instance, to again to put people on the center here, the humanity is like the whole landscape we're talking about. um we don't want to call people convicts. You can call them people who have been incarcerated, because we want to make sure that the word people is always front and centered. Or people, I'm blanking on certain things. But I do remember in my studies that we want to continue to say people. Like, okay, like you don't want to say that we were slaves. You want to say that those were people who were enslaved. Because like when we start to just throw that general sense of it, then the judgment comes in even harder, because you're forgetting the humanity piece out of it. So I agree with you completely. And then language is a big part of DEI. Without language, there's no transformation. Without language, there's no action.
I have a I have a different little view about the slave and the enslaved.
Talk about it. Let's go.
So I'm gonna go talk about it just a little bit because my grandfather was a sharecropper and understanding under the tenor of enslaved and slave.
Mhm.
Um, when you go back to history, there was this history of Slavs and understanding of slavery.
Right.
Um, I think saying that someone was a slave gives it this gives it a real hit.
Hmm.
Because I look at my grandmother that is very fair skinned, long hair, and I look at her face and I said, I know someone violated my grandmother's mother.
Mm.
There had to be. And being enslaved means that slave mean that you took something or you're taking something without someone's will of choice,
Right.
because that means you don't have a choice. And the choice of the matter is when someone has enslaved or slaved you, the person is the slave. That's what I believe. The person was the slave. Now you in slavery means that's what you think that you were in. But that person was choice was taken. And people of the Caucasian descent need
Mhm.
to understand that I'm a byproduct
Yes.
of a slave that was enslaved.
Mm, interesting. I see that point. And
Okay, that's just that's my take on it from a personal. That's why I didn't want to go down that road, but that's my point of view in that regard.
I love it. I mean, like it goes back to, what we're talking about before, and I was going to get to as well. Where this work is about the respect, and this work is about putting the people back into what we do, like the humanity piece of it, because I think that that is getting lost, and it is getting lost in the labels too. Even though labels can actually support us and, getting the tools in terms of equity, just like everything else, there's a pro and a con. However, and even in the midst of these organizations, because there's plenty of organizations advocating for certain groups of people, especially marginalized groups of people, and they're necessary. And they, as a collective, come up with these terms and they're saying, hey, we want to be called this. So we would like you to call us this. And it's still a group of people. However, in my opinion, and this is also something that is taught, you still need to ask the person in front of you who or what they prefer to, or how they prefer to be addressed. You can't always go with the group, because sometimes the individual in front of you ain't a part of that group. Like they don't even know nothing about it. So there, we can go from there.
Yeah, it's an individual preference. And why
Yeah.
don't you find out my individual preference first?
Exactly. So I think that is the biggest tip for everyone to take away in terms of DEI. We are learning these new terms, and some of these terms that we have been using have had a context around it that has been villainizing. But in this day and age, it is shifting and it is changing, where people are claiming or reclaiming or like pushing away or rejecting it. So we do need to educate ourselves, and then again, case by case basis, in other words. All right. All right. So sliding out of that. Okay, so you go on in your life, like how did you decide to become a psychotherapist? Did you know that's what you wanted to do when you got out of high school? Like,
No.
what did you want to be when you came out of high school? And then like how did you get to this path?
Well, I needed a job. So when I came
Okay.
out of high school, let's talk about that. So taking
Okay.
responsibilities of, going to school. Remember, I struggled in school. So going back to school for many years was not my thing.
Okay.
So I came out of high school and, going to parochial school, you do have a plan. So I did go into community college. I went to BMCC, that was Brooklyn, that
You know.
was Bronx Hub, that was Brooklyn Borough Community College down there on Chambers Street. And I started there and I flunked out of that. And
Okay.
so then I started to work. And then I got married very young. I got married when I was 19. I had my first child when I was 20.
Okay.
So, and then I started to have children back to back to back. So I was pregnant for essentially 8 years, like
Okay.
back to back. They're 2 years apart. So I essentially went into my own business, and then I wanted to say I would be a teacher. So I became an entrepreneur. I worked in a public library, and then I came and opened my own childcare facility, which is still running today, out of my home because I was having my children and I said, I needed to create income. I was always a go-getter. I said, this is something I was always going to circumvent. So I said, well, let me, start to do a childcare facility.
Yeah.
I'm good with my words. I started to befriend people. My daycare was bulging. I raised my children there. Having, did have some ups and downs in my relationship, but in that moment, I knew that I was sort of when parents would come, they would stay and get advice from me afterwards. So it became like a community hub. I was a community mom. They knew Cheryl, go to Cheryl Forever Young Daycare down the block, the white gate, not the pink gate, not the ring. And then go to her gate, go to her. You're gonna get fed real good. You're gonna have your children are gonna learn. So I was doing my thing in the early 2000s, and it was bulging. And
Okay.
then when my youngest went to kindergarten, I then went enrolled into school. I thought I wanted to become a teacher. And then you know what I took? An assessment test, a career assessment test. And there was something that popped up, marriage and family therapist. I was like, this is me, hands down. This is what I've been doing. God positions you in a certain kind of way. And I
Mm,
thank God for, falling into, my intuition, my prophetic voice inside of me to understand to lead me. And I usually wouldn't say that, but I'm in a church where the prophetic is really high and they understand to embrace that.
yeah.
So when it led me into doing that, I said, okay, so let me find a school. The next Mercy College was there. And I said, it has the exact program. Let me go right in. Did my 4 years, did 2 years, boom, 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 knocked it out. And I can tell you that this is what I was designed to do. I
Mm,
was designed to be a psychotherapist because in my years, now you're going to bring some things in, but I learned the systems of family.
mm,
And I also wanted to get into it because my son, we're very candid about it, had ADHD, and I wanted to learn more about his brain. And I'm very fascinated about the brain. And because of that, now we are now a family that two of my children that went to psychology, they're working in this area, and we're looking to do more things in regards to bridging the gap, bringing some programs to children and family systems because of the simple fact this is what they did to our people. They broke the family system and they started to separate us. And the
correct.
family system is the crux of you having generational wealth. It's the
Mhm.
crux of you being able to get indoors because you know this person that knows this person that knows that person. It is the crux of continuing yourself and being able to balance yourself and to be able to move to the next to move to the next level.
You better tell it.
That's the long and short of how I got become a therapist.
That's a dynamic story. So you said you were always a go-getter. So like, were you born into that type of that personality?
My mother always told me that she could never shut me up. Like there was always a time where I was doing my thing at 14. My mother told me I was a babysitter in the building. My mother told me I wasn't buying that, so you better go get a job. So at 14, I always had a job.
Wow.
And I was essentially providing for myself for so many years of having a job because my mother could not afford to be able to provide for myself and my brother. Actually, my for last year of high school, I paid my tuition because my mother had said, I can't afford. And to be very honest with you, I always tell the story of where I came from, if I may take this moment.
Of course.
I remember my mother getting evicted from our apartment, and she said, "Do me a favor." And I remember packing up our things in a shopping cart. And
Mm,
she said, "Take your necessities because we are moving into your grandparents' house now, apartment." And my grandparents lived in a one-bedroom apartment.
mm.
My uncle was already there, and so now we're moving three other people in
Yep.
myself, my little brother, and my mom. So I'm a teenager in freshman year of high school. And I had to we had to put something in a shopping cart. And that was it. Myself, my mother, and my brother.
Wow.
And I remember she said, "Don't come back here. Go straight to grandma and granddaddy's house." But you know me, I had to go. I had to go see. And I remember going back to the apartment, and I remember seeing them take out my white furniture of my bedroom out of
Mm,
my home and onto a truck. And that did something to me.
mm,
I remember for the 4 years of high school, I slept on a mattress in my grandparents' bedroom.
mhm.
Slept on a mattress. My mother slept on a couch with my brother outside for 4 years.
Yeah.
I think the reason why I had to be in that situation is because I would have never met my husband. I met him walking, my trajectory of where I walked from school
Wow.
changed. And I met him because my environment changed. I would have never met him.
Mm,
And we had to connect to have Janaea, Jason, Jordan, JL, Jayla, and Gregory Jr. They would have never been here if it wasn't for that. And
mm,
resiliency to understand that I went to school with holes in my uniform, was tucked up here, I had my sweater over, you could never tell.
mm,
And my mother saying to me, my junior, she said, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get your high school, finish your high school there. And I said, Mom, don't worry about it, I'm going to do it.
wow.
And from that point on, I understood that there was a greater force that was watching over me
Yeah.
and that things are not a mistake.
Right. Mm,
And when you are going down a road, trust that the flashlight will appear for you and illuminate your path. And everything back there is for feedback for today. I'm telling the story today for someone to hear that it may look bleak. It may look like I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent. I don't know this. I don't know that. But if you continue to begin to don't give up and
mm,
to begin to understand that God got you
mm,
or whatever you believe, the divine or whatever you believe to hold on to something that you are here for a reason,
mm,
season, and whatever your lifetime is. Make the most of it because you're there to connect the pieces for someone else from your story.
Woo-hoo. You're coming with the heat, Cheryl. You're coming in with the heat. I actually thank you for sharing that. I have two questions about that particular story.
Mhm.
Um, it's off the cuff. Did you always wanted to get married? Like, was that a dream of yours?
I did. I didn't want to. And I knew now my husband. I didn't like him. This is a story for you. Anybody that's looking for somebody, I was not attracted to my husband. I
Okay.
was not attracted. And you know what attracted me to my husband? His caring and ability to 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 be that stable force for me when there wasn't stability.
Mm,
That's the key that he plugged, that he unlocked for me because I was dating somebody else. But
wow.
at 14, I saw my grandfather because my biological father wasn't there. I saw something in him that I could grow with, that
Wow.
I can build with, and that I can live a lifetime with. Now, I didn't know that, but there was something in me to say, go ahead. Because my girlfriends was laughing at me, said, oh, your father's coming to pick you up because he's, but you know, your father's coming. I said, but you know something? I'm getting in the car and you're walking to the bus stop.
Boop.
Boop. I went to all girls Catholic school, so there you go. Your father's coming because you know my husband is 4 years older than me. So
Okay.
when he came, he had a beard and everything. He was 18, I was 15. So, you know, so it was like, also your father's come pick you up. You know how girls can be.
Yes.
But you know, but my mouth, I was very quick.
Right.
I was very quick. But you're walking to the bus stop and I'm getting in the car.
How about that?
How about that? And that's who he's always been for me. He's been that guy. He's been
Oh,
that guy.
That's so beautiful. And then the other question I had spinning off of that story. Okay. So, I hear what you're saying in terms of like when times get bleak, right? And then having that trust and understanding that, there are no accidents and things are just going to fall in line. What do you suggest a person do during those times? Because like there are some times where I think that that message can be taken so literal. And I'm talking about people in my family who just, to me, in my opinion, they're very passive with their faith. It's like God or Jesus is going to come down and just plop a blessing on you. And that's it. You're just going to sit there every day and a miracle is going to happen. Like, are there some like tips in between of what a person should be doing?
Yeah, so I love it because a lot of times, it's conditioning. So religion is different than spirituality. I
That's right. Yeah, I
Okay,
agree.
so when you have a religion, because let me go back to the slave owners.
Yeah.
Christianity was not our religion. I'm gonna just point that period, dotted, and there you go. So what happens is we don't understand fully what it looks like and how the Bible was taught to you if you believe in the Bible or Torah, whatever you believe in.
Yeah.
What the challenges is the practices we have surrounding our spiritual works.
Yes.
Prayer without works is dead. That is what I believe in. So when you pray and you say, okay, God, do it, it says, I am that I am. So the God within inside of you need to get up and go and do it.
Yes.
So when I look at an Oprah Winfrey, when I look at her, yes, she has a story. When I look at a Tyler Perry, when I look at all these people, they have a story. They had to get up off their do nothing and do something.
Yes.
So we get these degrees and we get these things and we get astute in certain areas. Work that area. See, the problem is what I believe is that we see someone else that can do something and then we go and try to be a crabs in a barrel and then try to do what they do.
Mm.
No, I believe that God gave you something that's special. Work it till the wheels fall off. If you
Mhm.
know that you make biscuits and you make biscuits well, make them. That special recipe that came into your head one night, make it until the wheels fall off. Make it till it works. I always talk about Carol's daughter.
Yes.
Carol's daughter's story, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go look her up. She talks about how her mom, the products wasn't working for her hair, and her mom started to just use what she used in the cabinet, whatever she had in her kitchen to
Wow.
make it work for you. That's just like with the Bible, the story. I like the woman with the oil in Second Kings 4. It talks about the woman with the oil. What's in your house? She says, my husband is dead because guess what? You don't it's not about your husband. It's not about your son. It's about what's inside of you. This is why I tell people to speak your power now. It's about how you can speak your power
Mm.
without disempowering anyone else, connecting with God, the Holy Spirit, the divine, whatever you call it, to get what you need to begin to support the community to build you. Because after the prophet Elijah told her to go ahead and go and get some vessels and don't borrow but a few, what happened was she needed support to bring the vessels in. So
Yeah.
you're going to need support from your community.
Yes.
However, we were snatched from our community, so we got to be taught how to work
Mhm.
in community. And I get that. So when you understand how to step with each other, how to begin to move with each other, it presents opportunities for all to partake.
Ooh. Yes. Yes. And yes. And you're right.
Amen. In glory.
Amen. And Ashe.
And I say, there you go.
Speaking of, speak your power now. How did that come about?
Speak Your Power Now was cultivated in 2012 when I was finishing up my degree in psychology, and I said, you know what? I'm going to use what I know with the tools. And that's how I began to say, I noticed that a lot of people don't really know how to manage their emotions when they're speaking, how to cultivate what they would like to say.
Mm,
I was a yeller, a screamer, so that didn't work, and there just was an aggressive part of being. So what I did was I cultivated a space where people can begin to really understand what is assertive way of speaking. So this is where you want to be. You want to understand your voice and how your emotions, and not to downplay your emotions, but to break through to some of those things that you are now struggling with.
mm,
And I created very early on the pies method, where you understand what it looks like, where the pies method teaches us how to begin to speak with power.
mm.
You're going to pause, identify, and explore the solutions you can put when you are moving with that. And there's a piece I want to say, a lot of us don't know how to sit with the pause. We don't know how to be with the pause. That silence, you got to go within to get your answer. Because I was very quick with it. You never want to reactivate it. And a
Mm,
lot of times when we're triggered, we reactivate it. Then there's some of us that sit with the pause too long and
mm,
they fester. And that's a passive aggressive. And then when you're ready to respond, now you're just upset. Or
right.
like you said, some of your family members, they sit with a pause too long, like, okay, God, what you gonna do?
Right.
And you're like, and now you're frustrated with them, like, do lady, you're not gonna get up. And now you get aggressive because you're seeing that they should be getting up, moving. So what it does is it takes the responsibility of this gift of language. We have a gift of language. We're the only species that have a gift of language. And what Speak Your Power does, it allows us to begin to understand how we can bring the network of community together, of thought leaders, of sisterhood, of dedicating ourselves, of harnessing that unique part of us,
Mm,
understanding that we love the tone of the tenor of our voice, the cadence or whatever it is, but understanding of how to reshape our narratives
mm,
so we can begin to shift our own narrative, create a new story, and begin to move together with each other that we need. So we need to amplify our voices. We can empower one another instead of disempowering.
mm. I love that. And oof, I'm sure we all have a story about that. It's like being able to even speak to power, um,
Mhm,
but to speak powerfully and then use that power in our speaking. Um, there's definitely levels to this.
for sure.
Um, why did this become important to you?
Well, because there was so many times in the room where I felt disempowered, um, and not and my triggers is feeling dumb and stupid.
Okay.
So what I would be reactivated by that and start yelling and screaming and try to get my point across, and then nobody can hear you because now, Cheryl, you're yelling and you're screaming, and then now what you're attempting to say is lost in the
Mm,
yell, and it's lost in the screaming. So the first thing that I teach people how to do is get control of their emotional state,
mm,
because when you're triggered, you're no longer present, and the pause is the thing to sit with. And we're so, as human beings, are not. Um, we're not good with silence at times. We're not good with the pause. I should be saying I feel like I should be saying something. I should be, or whatever. And the point was I had to learn how
mm,
to express my thoughts and my emotions effectively, but never to disempower anyone, whether it's personal or professionally,
mm,
because there are many relationships that have been destroyed by words.
mm,
Many relationships dismantled by things that people have said. And language is the thing that connects us or disconnects us. Think about going to another country. You can't understand their language. It disconnects you. Yeah.
Wow. Ooh, I think we talked about this once on your podcast too, about that pause. You know,
Yeah.
and at that time, I remember saying, ooh, I can use more of that pause. Because if there's one thing that I did learn in New York was to have a quick reaction and to be fast and on my feet. However, you know, there's levels to this, right? And it's a tool, and I don't need to do that all the time. Now I'm good with the pause in terms of, when I'm talking to someone and they're starting to get emotional and they're about to cry, right?
Mhm.
Now there's people in the room who go immediately to start to feel the air. They want to say something to try to get that person to not cry. I would rather sit there and let that person cry. Like, let's be quiet as this person is experiencing an emotion. And I experience people are not comfortable with that. Like, let's just be quiet. You don't always have to fill the air up with words. Just let someone be. So I'm good on that sense, but I could probably use some support with using some pauses in between me being stimulated to responding. And maybe I can't even call it a response. I would say it's a reaction. I do think there's a difference between reacting and responding. Responding may require more of a pause, if you will, but I'm definitely quick draw McGraw when someone's like, I feel like I've been violated. Like, if you say something to me that's like off the wall, I'm coming at your head. But and it's an immediate response. But as I'm getting older, it's like, I want to be very cognizant about that, right? I need to be more deliberate in how I expend my energy. So I definitely see the importance in that. Um, and I want to say something else to speak your power that I find very fascinating and necessary, especially with women in the workplace, right? I have been called to help a lot of women, mostly Black women, to learn how to navigate through the corporate world, which is a beast in itself. It is plagued with systemic oppression in different ways and different, whether it's, gender or race. So I want to be able to support women out there who need to use their voice as a tool. And they may deem themselves as, I'm an introvert and I'm shy, and that's okay, and let me be that. But there's a certain point where you need to use your voice. Like, what's your take on that? And like, how do you support women in the workplace? Because I know you do.
I do. So there's a time where in the workplace, we all know that it's very highly male dominant, especially C-suites. It's happening, more and more that, women are becoming to take the lead and things of that nature. However, statistically, even in us as white males have it, we have to see what can we do. And I was just telling a story the other day about how they see us and
Mm,
want to be seen. And I always talk to women in corporate America or even in your own business or whatever. How do you stand in that? Is that understanding that you are a woman. And if you identify as that, however, you come with the power of change. You come with something that is special. You have the idea, you have the credentials, you have the things that you can do. It's just that my voice may just sound differently than yours. And as I began to, people and women need to understand how to be okay with self
Mm,
before you go into a space that you know that sometimes you feel like you're boxing.
mm,
And a lot of women do not go in self-assured and connected with oneself
mm.
and confidence. You are not going to be you're not a man. You're not masculine. You don't have that. You have a feminine part of you, and begin to embrace that and be grateful that God has you. And then move in your specialty. There is going to be biases out there.
Right.
It's out there. It's what you do with that, and be mindful of who you are connecting those things.
Mm,
And that's how I gauge that. First, I want to understand where they are.
yeah.
So then where you are, you won't compromise self when you were triggered in a moment by maybe these biases.
Yes. Okay. As we wrap up, I was going to ask you, what tips do you have to leave if you had three things to educate our audience? And our audience will be full,
Oh,
Black women, of course, but also, anyone who's under those marginalized communities who gets to use their voice
yeah.
to empower themselves and others. What are three tips that you would leave with us today?
Well, firstly, I want to say is you have a responsibility to prioritize self.
Mm,
And a lot of times, women um, get get it twisted about that we have to do for our children, have to do for our family, have to do this. And I was in that. And when I understood that a lot of my life, and I share the story, very much so a lot of times when I found out that I was not present in my life.
mm,
I found out I wasn't present. I was just having the children and working and generating and stuff. I wasn't replenishing Cheryl.
mm,
So now I'm pausing in the moment to begin to understand I love some things. I'm mindful of who I am, and I prioritize myself to
ooh,
begin to move with my mind, body, and soul. That's number one. Secondly, is my spirituality. That's very important to me. I believe wholeheartedly the God within inside of me, I'm supposed to connect to begin to support others. And
mm,
the network that I'm chosen to do that for, I want to make sure that I'm standing on the principles of God, and I'm standing on the principles that will then begin to be a bridge for others. And thirdly, don't, well, I want to say, I don't like to use the word, but don't advocate for yourself. Advocate for yourself, because I had to advocate for myself many times. But I want you to learn that there's going to be some systemic biases. I mean, in inequities. There are going to be a lot of things that you in settings that you're going to get very upset about.
yeah.
But make sure when you advocate for yourself, you're creating great boundaries, healthy boundaries. And then when you're going to develop yourself, begin to develop the confidence that you can support yourself and others.
Mm. Ooh, my goodness. I mean, so good. I feel like so full. Uh,
Good.
speaking with you. I always love speaking with you. You're very profound in your speaking. I've told you before, I love your voice, even the sound of it. I just love how you speak. I love the wisdom that spews out of your mouth. So I'm just really just super grateful for you to be here and also to be able to share your story and yourself and what you have learned with my audience. And would you be a doll and tell everyone where they can find you? I know you also have a membership too.
I do. I do. So of course, so right now, if you want, speakyourpowernow.com. Just as simple as that. I wanted to keep it as simple as that. And we are launching, if the enrollment is open, and May 8th, I'm going to be having a sisterhood, a Speak Your Power Now network, where the membership is there. You can go on to any level you desire. Discover your voice level. That tier is $19.95. Empower your voice. That's $39.95. And the leadership, the voice of leadership. I believe that
Mm,
um, we're in a space where leaders are taught.
Yes.
and create it and cultivate it. And I believe that when you cultivate your communication, and when you're in a community that begins to inspire you, and communicate authentically and assertively, you can begin to strive, you can strike a balance between your professional and your personal life.
Right.
So those connections are in a space where you're not trying to pull someone down, but you're mastering your own voice to your with your unique strengths.
Y'all heard her. Speak your power now. And is that also in your socials like Facebook? You have Instagram?
Yeah. So if you go on Speak Your Power Now, at the top of that, you can go ahead and go to my socials. I think it's Cheryl A. Clark on there. You can go ahead and click that, Cheryl A. Clark. I think on Instagram. And then you also can go, there is there actually is a page on there. You can join the page totally for free on Facebook, and it's Speak Your Power Now. Exactly that. It's very, very simple. Go ahead and join the community. Let's get it started where we're now empowering others to speak their power now.
Let's go. Let's get it. All right.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
being here. I love you so much.
Thank
And
you.
also my audience, I love you as well. Thank you for being here as well. And yeah, until next time. See y'all.